Hello. So here we are with the mystery of the Manor, and it's chapter 6, The Secret of the Tunnel. As Pip examined the wall, he saw that 3 of the remaining bricks were loose. The mortar surrounding the rest of the bricks was quite firm, and Pip wondered if those loose bricks had been deliberately made to slide out of the wall. Perhaps there was a hiding place behind them. This time he turned the beam of the night light to its brightest setting and pressed his hands firmly on the bricks to help him keep his balance. He peeped down into the open section. He had to wriggle to see properly through the hole. Straight away he was aware that the air felt thick and heavy down there. It had been undisturbed for centuries by anything other than the tiny frogs. He wasn't surprised to see half a dozen of these little creatures jump through the ray of light in a frightened hurry as he watched. Looking carefully, he saw that there was indeed a space behind the wall. Mostly it seemed to be empty, but it was covered with a fine grey powder, once the leaves of water lilies, long since decayed. Right behind the hole there was a pile of dirt, and to his surprise he could see a small dark object resting on top of the pile, at least half a metre above the level of the water. Pip knew that he wouldn't be able to get his head and his hand through the small hole at the same time, so he planned what he would do. He started by removing the other 3 loose bricks, placing them carefully at his feet. He judged that whatever it was there on the pile, it was small enough to fit through the hole. Could someone have hidden treasure here? He took another look at the object, memorised its position, and then stood up. He slid his right hand through the opening into the dark hole. Inside it felt dry to his touch compared to the ones outside the hole. He reached up towards the pile, but misjudged how near it was, and his outstretched fingers suddenly bumped into the object. It felt quite hard and dry, as though it was made out of wood. He began to slide it nearer. The end of it comfortably fitted into his hand. It felt firm and quite heavy. As he drew it towards himself, it seemed to be fairly long, somewhat longer than its width, and it felt rough in his hand. Carefully now he manoeuvred it down from the pile, out through the opening and into the light. Twisting round without losing his footing, he found Beth almost at his shoulder, determined not to miss anything. Pip bent down to get a closer look, but it was no good. He couldn't see very well. He would have to get it into the daylight to inspect it properly. "Come on, let's get out of here. It's dark and smelly, and it'll soon be tea time," he said. "Here, you take this." He held the box out to Beth. "I'll bring the fishing things." She didn't need telling twice, handed the float and the landing net to him, and took the box. It felt rough and heavy, but this time she was so excited about their find that she hardly even noticed as her sandals slid on the slimy bottom of the water and her legs bumped into the stems of the lilies. Pip was closely following her, and she was glad of the light from the torch as she made her way back through the gloomy tunnel, back to the firm grassy bankside. Pip unstrapped the light and put it and the net down by the float before sitting beside her to examine their find. "Whatever it is, it seems to have been deep in that sealed up section behind the loose brick for a very long time," he said. Now that they were out in the light, Beth could see that it was covered with some grey strands and reddish-brown dust. "What's all that grey stringy stuff?" she asked, trying to wipe off some of the strands that were sticking to her fingers. "Oh, it's only old cobwebs," said Pip, trying to blow the dust away. "Ugh," she said, rubbing her hands on the damp grass. "Cobwebs won't hurt you," he said, laughing at her reaction. "Wonder what it's like under all that muck," he said. As Pip held the object, he discovered that it was in fact made of leather, not wood. Among the fragile strands of spiderweb there was a thicker grey piece which looked like a bit of string, but it was so old that it disintegrated under his fingers. The leather was cracked, and now that it was no longer held together with a string, it began to unroll a little. "There's something wrapped inside!" exclaimed Pip eagerly. He peeled back the old leather, which was quite stiff, and revealed the dark brown wood of a small, elaborate chest. It was about as long as a school ruler, 30 centimetres. It was half that in width, and he guessed that it was about 10 centimetres in depth. Now that it was no longer covered with a strip of leather, they could see it much better. While he was unrolling it, he felt the chest was rough to the touch. Now that they could both see that there were patterns all over it. The top and sides were deeply carved with oak leaves, and on top there was a bunch of what had been 3 life-sized and very knobbly acorns, but 2 of them had been broken off a long time ago, and Pip saw them still lying in the piece of leather. The bottom of the chest was quite flat. "Wow," whispered Beth, almost under her breath. "I wonder how you get into it," said Pip. "It must open up somehow, I'm sure." He twisted it this way and that, trying to find a lid or a fastener, but whichever way he looked, he couldn't see anything that might open up, or even anything that looked like hinges. "Well, that's a mystery," said Beth. "Let me have a look." He passed it over to her, but was secretly glad that she was just as puzzled as he had been. "Perhaps Nana and Gramps might be able to help," she said. "Do you think they'll let us keep it?" asked Pip. "It might belong to someone else. Mind you, it looked like it had been under that bridge for ages. Let's take it to our den on the way back to the caravan and have another look at it tomorrow. It's nearly tea time, and Nana and Gramps will be back from Chelmsford soon. I need to swap this float over and get all this stuff taken back. Can you stick the box in your drawing bag for now?" As Beth was trying to slide the chest into her bag, a couple of ducks, which had been gliding close by, suddenly began screeching and flapping. After her earlier fright with the snake, Beth jumped back from the water's edge, and the box went flying through the air, landing with an ominous cracking sound. "Oh no, now look what you've done," declared Pip. He bent down to pick it up and saw the last of the acorns from the top of the chest lying there on the grass. "It's broken now," he said, bending to pick it up. As he looked down at his hand, he realised that he was only holding the top of the box. Somehow the bottom had got dislodged in the fall, and there it was, still on the grass. Examining it, he found that the bottom section of the box had been made to slide completely inside the decorated top part, which was why they hadn't been able to see how to open it before. There seemed to be something inside, so they both crouched down to look. Pip reached in, but there wasn't much there. In fact, they were both quite disappointed that it seemed to be just a scuffy old book. "Oh, heck," said Beth. "I was hoping it might have been some treasure. I thought it might have been full of coins. Oh, yes, or maybe jewellery. But, oh well, what a shame. Well, I better get this fishing stuff put away, or Gramps really will become Grumps, as Jack likes to call him." "Oh, Pip, I don't like it when he makes fun of them," said Beth. "But you're right about the fact that you better put things away properly. I'll carry the box and book and collect my things. You'll sort out the tackle." They walked back round to the seat on the other side of the pond. Beth soon gathered her stuff together, and as she was sitting in the sunlight, waiting for Pip to pack everything just so, she opened the old leather-bound cover of the book. The pages were thick, and their edges were discoloured by age. She opened it at the first page. The sun glinted on a metallic, shiny square. It was a beautiful letter E in black and gold, and decorated with bright yellow and red flowers twining around fresh green leaves. At the bottom corner of the square was a vivid turquoise blue butterfly, hovering over the petals of creamy white water lilies. It was really beautiful. "Oh, Pip," she said, "look at this. It's just like the illustrations the monks used to use. I can't really read what it says, but isn't it beautiful?" Pip glanced over, but was still trying to tidy up the tackle box. "Oh, it's only an old book. It's so boring. I thought it was going to be full of real treasure. I've about finished now, so come on, stick it in your bag and let's get a move on. I'm hungry." The rain was steadily falling on the caravan roof as Beth began to help Nana with the drying up. Pip was grumbling as he cleared the table, trying to remember which jars and bottles went into which cupboards. Nana had said that the caravan was so small that everything had to have its proper place, or it would soon get too untidy to live in. The trouble was that Nana's proper place never seemed to make any sense to Pip. Why did the tomato sauce bottle go in the cupboard near the bathroom instead of the one near the table? He'd never understand. Women. Every time Pip looked over questioningly at Gramps, he just shook his head and raised his eyes to the ceiling. Gramps had long since stopped trying to fathom out the way of women. He just packed things away where he was told. Anything for an easy life. Gramps had wiped down the table and reached out to get his fishing tackle box from under the seat, and Pip's heart began to race. He suddenly remembered that when Beth dropped the box, although he'd put everything away, he'd forgotten all about changing the floats over. "Oh no," he thought, "perhaps Gramps won't notice." But that was just too much to hope for. "Well, well," Pip heard, as he finally put the salt in the cupboard over the oven. "And who's been eating my porridge? Or should I say, who's been fishing with my rod? And with my new float, I might add." "Oh, well, well, yes, I guessed it was you, Pip. But why the best float? You could have broken it, or lost it." "He did lose it, well, nearly anyway," said Beth, before she could stop herself. She knew from the look on Pip's face that she would be in for it later, but she just couldn't help herself. She had spent the whole of tea time thinking about their find, and had been so preoccupied that on a couple of occasions Nana had to repeat a question twice, and had called her a real daydreamer. The moment Gramps mentioned the float, she just wanted to tell the full story. Nothing so interesting had happened before, and she was dying to tell. She wished she hadn't agreed to leave the box in their den instead of showing it straight away. "There seems to be a story here," says Gramps. "Something's been bothering our Beth all evening," commented Nana. "Now come on, you two, out with it. What have you been up to? I hope you've not been getting into trouble with that young Jack again." "No," they responded in unison. "Well, something's been going on. Would you like to explain about the float, Pip?" asked Gramps, sounding rather cross. And so, as simply as possible, Pip told the story, although he majored on the fact that Jack was not with them, and somehow managed to make the rescue of the float the end of the story. He never mentioned the tunnel, the hole in the wall, or the carved chest. But of course, Beth was the only one to realise that he'd missed part of the story. As Nana and Gramps were listening, they began to smile, and Beth couldn't help joining in, telling about how cold and squidgy the mud had been. So in the end, their grandparents just thought it was the fact that Pip had borrowed the fishing tackle without asking that had been on their minds over tea. "Well, another time I don't mind you borrowing my things if you are careful with them, but you ought to put them away the way that you found them. If you hadn't intended me to know you had used them, you should have undone the float and left the line kitted up for me. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" "No, not really. I just kind of forgot." Suddenly it was almost tea time, so I packed up quicker than I intended. I'm sorry, Gramps. I won't do it again. Said Gramps, still sounding none too pleased. Now, come on, Gramps, said Nana, with a twinkle in her eye. That was as nice an apology as you could ask for, and you can't tell me that you don't know what it's like when time runs away with you whilst you're fishing. It's not like you've never been late for your tea, is it? Finally, Nana had drawn a smile from Gramps. I know you're right, he grinned. But next time, he said to Pip, just ask, eh? OK, said Pip, relieved that the whole incident was apparently over now. It was soon time for bed, and tonight it was Pip's turn to choose the story. He and Beth were so busy whispering about their find as they were getting ready for bed that he hadn't even looked through the bedtime storybook. When Nana arrived with their drinks, he just opened the book at random. The picture was of a young boy wearing a brightly coloured coat, and as soon as Nana began, both children recognised the story from last year's school musical, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. As Beth was settling down to sleep, she couldn't help thinking over the exciting things they had done that day, running through in her mind all the strange events once again. She began to draw her curtains, and almost without realising what she was doing, she found her eyes drawn to the small diamond-pane caravan. This really was a mysterious place.